Agatha Raisin and Inspector Wilkes' wrong arrest. A quiet Cotswold village fete turns deadly dramatic when a pompous inspector's walnut scare and a timid baker's stalker unravel into a twisted game of fear, secrets, and one very determined amateur sleuth. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Carsely basked beneath a soft gold afternoon, the sort that fooled people into believing the Cotswolds were all honeystone charm and no drafty cottages. The fete had taken over the village green in its usual riot of bunting, trestle tables, and quiet competitiveness. Children shrieked near the coconut shy, dogs strained at leads, and the Women's Institute guarded their cake display with the grim focus of Buckingham Palace sentries. Agatha Raisin strode in with her chin high, handbag swinging like a warning. Her hair had been lacquered to within an inch of its life that morning, and she wore her best navy jacket, the one that suggested capability, authority, and the faint threat of violence. Today she had come to win the jam competition. She had spent all evening boiling fruit until her cottage smelt like a boiling cauldron of optimism. She deserved glory. She needed it, frankly. Doris Simpson hovered beside the jam table. Her pinched mouth pursed in the sort of expression that meant trouble. "Morning, Mrs. Raisin," she said, sounding as though the phrase pained her. Agatha set her jar down with stage-managed poise, ignoring the flutter of nerves. "Morning, Doris. Lovely turnout." "Oh, yes," Doris replied, leaning in, though some entries aren't quite what one might call sound. She lifted Agatha's jar with exaggerated delicacy, peered through the glass, and let out a small triumphant gasp. Mould. The word landed like a slap. A small grey bloom clung to the surface of the jam, mocking her. Agatha felt heat climb up her neck. "That," she snapped, "is a trick of the light." "Oh no," Doris breathed, rather delighted. "Quite unmistakable, poor dear." Nearby villagers turned their heads. A smothered giggle rose from the sponge cake table. Agatha could feel herself burning alive. She wanted to grab the jar and fling it across the green. Instead, she forced out, "Well, perhaps it adds character." "Mould is rarely praised for its character," Doris said primly, setting the jar back as though it might detonate. Before Agatha could retaliate, a pompous voice boomed across the green. "Stand aside there! Police business!" Inspector Wilkes barreled through the crowd, cheeks a blotchy red under the strain of importance. He was the temporary superior from Mercester, drafted in after someone upstairs had decided Bill Wong required firm leadership. Wilkes's uniform strained at the buttons. His moustache bristled with theatrical indignation. "Good heavens," Agatha muttered. "What now?" Wilkes marched up to the WI scone table, where Mrs. Mason offered him a plateful with the resigned air of a woman who had long abandoned hope. "A fine example of community harmony," Wilkes declared, grabbing a scone, "and an excellent opportunity to demonstrate police presence." Then he bit in. A second later, the inspector stumbled, clutched his throat, and let out a strangled choke worthy of Amdram Shakespeare. The crowd froze. Mrs. Mason shrieked. Someone dropped a Victoria sponge. Agatha blinked. "Oh, for heaven's sake!" Wilkes staggered back, eyes bulging like a startled frog. Walnut," he croaked. "Deliberately placed. Attempted poisoning." He sank to one knee, waving the half-chewed scone like evidence from a major murder trial. Agatha folded her arms. The man had simply choked, and yet he behaved as though a sniper lurked behind the bric-a-brac stall. Bill Wong arrived at last, breathless and apologetic. "Sir, are you—" "Don't coddle me, Wong," Wilkes bellowed, shoving the scone at him. "Walnuts! Hidden! Someone tried to murder me!" Agatha rolled her eyes. "You choked. It happens. We are all very moved." Wilkes rounded on her. "Mrs. Raisin, this is a serious offence, and I know precisely who is responsible." He jabbed a finger towards the trembling Rosie Thorne, who stood behind her tray of scones. Rosie was a timid woman in her 30s, all nervy smiles and flour-smudged cardigans. "Me?" Rosie squeaked. I would never." "Arrest her, Wong," Wilkes ordered. "Quick, before she disposes of further evidence." Bill hesitated. "Inspector, there's really no—" "Do it!" Agatha stepped forward. "Bill, don't you dare! It was an accident." "Mrs. Raisin," Bill murmured, voice tight. "Please don't make this worse." Rosie burst into frightened tears. The crowd murmured with the guilty relish of people torn between empathy and entertainment. Doris Simpson leaned to her neighbour and whispered loudly, I did always think her pastry was a bit violent. Agatha clenched her fists. This is absurd. Rosie couldn't poison a sandwich, never mind a policeman, and that's saying something. But Wilkes puffed himself up with triumphant certainty. We have means, motive, and opportunity. Motive? Agatha demanded. Resentment, Wilkes declared. She clearly envies the W.I. bakers and therefore lashed out. She envies their baking, Agatha snapped. Have you tasted half of it? Enough, Wilkes said. Rosie Thorne, you're under arrest for attempted murder via confectionery. Bill led Rosie away as gently as the situation allowed, while Wilkes strutted behind them, enjoying his moment of imagined heroism. Rosie glanced back at Agatha with damp, pleading eyes. Agatha's heart thumped with outrage. Don't you worry, she called after her. I'll sort this out. Behind her, villagers burst into gossip. Someone claimed they'd seen Rosie arguing with Mrs. Mason. Another insisted she'd been behaving oddly all week. By the lemonade stand, Alf Bloxby muttered that walnuts had always struck him as suspicious. The entire fete swelled with speculation. Agatha stalked towards the shade behind the tombola stall, fury hot in her chest. She fished out her cigarettes and lit one with a sharp snap of her lighter. The smoke curled upward like a sigh of exasperation from the heavens. Hodge, tucked indignantly in her large handbag to prevent him running under stalls, gave a soft, complaining meow. I know, Agatha told him. I didn't plan to bring you either. Hodge blinked slowly, offended by everything from the noise to the smell of fried onions. Agatha took a long drag and exhaled her annoyance into the warm air. She had endured humiliation, mould, Doris Simpson's glee, and Wilkes's buffoonery, all in a single afternoon. If the universe meant to insult her, it had done an admirable job. But what gnawed at her was Rosie's tearful face. Rosie Thorne was incapable of harming anyone. She barely managed to speak above a whisper. Even her scones were timid things. An attempted poisoning? Nonsense. Agatha flicked ash onto the grass. If Wilkes won't bother looking for the truth, she muttered, I damn well will. Hodge's faint, disgruntled meow emerged from the handbag. Exactly, Agatha said. Someone here is lying, and I mean to find out who. She squared her shoulders, crushed the cigarette under her heel, and strode back into the fete with purpose. Behind her, the gossip swirled like smoke on a breeze, following her as faithfully as Hodge's baleful stare. Someone had made a fool of her, and someone had frightened Rosie, and Agatha Raisin, vain, furious, and itching for revenge, never ignored a challenge. Not when there was a mystery brewing in Carsely. Not ever. By early evening, Carsely had settled into a mild, cloudy hush that promised drizzle without ever committing. The fete was barely over, yet the village already buzzed with speculation. Gossip moved faster than weather in the Cotswolds. By 6 o'clock, half the cottagers had formed their own theories about Rosie Thorne, Inspector Wilkes, and the walnut that had launched a scandal. Agatha Raisin felt each whisper like an extra wrinkle. She pushed open the door of the Red Lion, letting the warm pub air wrap around her like a whiskey-soaked blanket. The place hummed, villagers clustered in tight knots, pints in hand, voices low and eager. Agatha sensed the guilty thrill in them all. Nothing delighted Carsely as much as a little local drama, provided the danger stayed politely contained. She approached the bar, chin high. Every conversation paused a beat too long. "Don't mind me," she said. "Just fetching a gin, not poisoning anyone." The room relaxed with nervous titters. Bill Wong sat at a small table, jacket off, sleeves rolled, expression weary but loyal. Mrs. Bloxby perched opposite him with her usual calm poise. Agatha joined them, sliding into the spare chair with a huff. "Rough day?" Bill asked gently. "Rough doesn't begin to cover it," Agatha said, humiliated over jam, forced to witness Wilkes auditioning for the role of buffoon-in-chief, and now half the village thinks Rosie is a homicidal baker. Mrs. Bloxby folded her hands. "People are frightened, I expect. A scare at the fete unsettles everyone." "She didn't do it," Agatha said firmly. "Rosie couldn't poison a wasp." "Some say she snapped after losing the cake competition 13 years running," Bill murmured. Agatha shot him a glare. "You don't believe that?" "No," Bill admitted. "But Wilkes does, and he's shouting loudly enough to convince the neighbours." Mrs. Bloxby leaned closer. "Rosie has always been gentle, but she is private. Sometimes people hide things because they fear being misunderstood. That quiet remark snagged Agatha's attention. Hide things? What sort of things? Nothing sinister, Mrs. Bloxby said softly. Just personal burdens. Everyone carries them. Agatha took a long swallow of her gin. Personal burdens always hinted at secrets, and secrets were often a better motive for mischief than cake competitions. Before she could press further, the pub door swung open and Charles Fraith drifted in with an air of idle nobility. His tweed jacket looked effortlessly expensive. He surveyed the room, spotted Agatha and sauntered over. "My dear Agatha," he drawled, leaning an elbow on the table. "I hear Carsely has produced a poisoning plot. I do hope I haven't missed the corpse." "No corpse," Agatha said. "Just Wilkes being dramatic." "Ah," Charles replied. "So still a corpse of sorts, only walking." Bill snorted into his pint. Mrs. Bloxby hid a smile. Charles lowered his voice. "I should help you investigate. I'm frightfully bored at home. My cook has decided to experiment with lentils." "Your sympathy is noted," Agatha said dryly, though the offer warmed her more than the gin. The landlady bustled past, muttering about poor Rosie. "Always thought she was simple," she whispered to her friend. "Simple and twitchy. Twitchiness leads to trouble." Agatha bristled. "She's not simple. She's terrified." The landlady flushed and hurried off. Before Agatha could fume further, the phone behind the bar rang. The landlady answered, then waved Agatha over. "It's for you. Very excited-sounding gentleman." Agatha already knew. Only Roy Silver rang with that level of urgency. She took the receiver. "Roy?" "Aggie darling," Roy shrieked. "I've just heard. Attempted poisoning at a Cotswold fête. It's divine. Well, not divine for the victim, obviously, but divine in terms of media potential. I'm coming down first thing tomorrow. Clear your schedule and your guest room." "Hodge sleeps in that room," Agatha said. "Then Hodge will have to compromise." "Hodge does not compromise." "Then he can sleep in your bed. You never use the whole thing anyway." Agatha hung up before she could let him irritate her further. She returned to the table looking vaguely hunted. "Roy's coming," she said. Bill winced. Charles laughed. Mrs. Bloxby offered a sympathetic pat. The pub buzz thickened. Someone claimed Wilkes had produced evidence linking Rosie to a jar of walnut halves in her pantry. Someone else swore they'd seen Rosie muttering to herself all week. A third insisted she'd argued with Mrs. Mason over jam placement. Agatha could bear no more village logic. "Bill, I'm going to speak to Rosie." "Be gentle," Mrs. Bloxby murmured. "She'll be frightened." "I'm always gentle," Agatha said, ignoring Charles's faint choking sound. Rosie Thorne lived in a small cottage tucked behind a cluster of elder trees. It looked timid even before one entered. The curtains trembled as though listening for danger. Agatha knocked. There was a long pause before Rosie opened the door a crack. "Mrs. Raisin?" "Yes, I'm coming in. Put the kettle on." Rosie blinked, bewildered, but obeyed. Inside, the cottage smelt of flour and lavender polish. Agatha took in the neatness, the careful clutter. Rosie moved with the caution of someone expecting reproach at any moment. "I'm not here to accuse you," Agatha said. Rosie's shoulders sagged. "Everyone else is." "Well, they're idiots." Rosie gave a weak smile. "Inspector Wilkes said I had motive, and access, and malicious tendencies." "You? Malicious?" Agatha snorted. "You apologized to chairs after bumping into them." Rosie flushed. "I don't know why this happened." Agatha sipped her tea, eyeing Rosie carefully. Something didn't fit. The woman was terrified, yes, but not of Wilkes. She kept glancing over her shoulder toward the back room, as though expecting someone to burst out. Agatha followed her gaze. "What's in there?" "Nothing," Rosie squeaked too quickly. "Just storage." Agatha didn't believe a word. She stood, wandering the lounge in what she hoped was a casual manner. A cushion on the sofa was slightly askew. Beneath it, something black peeked out. She lifted the cushion. A small notebook lay hidden. Rosie gasped. "Please, don't." But Agatha had already opened it. The pages brimmed with anxious scribbles, dates, little notes about noises outside the cottage, and one repeated phrase. "The visitor." Agatha felt a chill. "Who is this?" Rosie wrung her hands. "I didn't want anyone to think I was imagining things. Someone's been tapping on my windows at night. And leaving little things, stones, twigs, once a button. I thought it was children." Children don't terrify grown women. Rosie hesitated. I didn't want trouble. I thought it would stop. Has it? Rosie's silence answered that. And you didn't tell Bill? I didn't want a fuss. Agatha slammed the notebook shut. Rosie Thorne, you're being stalked. Rosie flinched. I thought it would sound silly. It doesn't sound silly, Agatha said, gentling her tone. It sounds dangerous. Before Rosie could reply, a tap sounded at the window. Both women froze. Agatha spun around. A silhouette moved past the hedge and vanished. Good grief, Agatha breathed. That wasn't a figment. Rosie whimpered. It's been happening for weeks. Agatha moved to the window, but saw only mist settling over the garden. You should have told someone, she said. I was frightened people would think I was odd. You live in Carsely, Agatha said. Odd is the village pastime. A faint laugh broke through Rosie's fear. Agatha stood straighter. Listen to me. Someone is targeting you, and Wilkes is too busy congratulating himself to notice. She slipped the notebook into her handbag. I'm keeping this, and I'll find out who your visitor is. Rosie gripped her arm. Please don't make it worse. I won't, Agatha promised, though her promises tended to stretch on occasion. But I'll make it louder. That usually helps. She stepped outside. Dusk had fallen, soft and brooding, with a hint of incoming drizzle. Carsely looked peaceful, which irritated her. Nothing should look peaceful when danger lurked. Hodge meowed sharply from her handbag, having sensed her rising tension. Yes, Agatha muttered. We're going home, but tomorrow we start digging. She looked back at Rosie's dim cottage, at the nervous curtains, at the hedge where the shadow had stood. Someone wanted Rosie frightened. Someone knew her routines. Someone had lurked close enough to tap a window. Agatha lit a cigarette, watching the smoke curl into the darkening sky. A visitor, she whispered. Well, they've chosen the wrong village. She flicked ash into the gravel and strode away, her heels crisp in the evening quiet. Hodge shifted in the bag, unimpressed but faithful. Tomorrow she would find the truth, or the truth would find her. In Carsely it usually did. Morning drizzle clung to Mercester like a sulky veil, the sort that dampened hair, spirits, and any hope of keeping one's jacket respectable. Agatha Raisin marched across the station car park with the purposeful stride of a woman who had been wronged by fate, village gossip, and at least one incompetent superior officer. Her heels clicked in sharp irritation. Hodge, left at home after expressing strong views about the previous night's outing, had watched her leave with a glare that suggested she would regret it later. Inside, Mercester Police Station smelt of overbrewed tea and paper files gone slightly soft at the edges. Agatha swept past the reception desk with a curt nod that dared anyone to stop her. No one tried. Most of them had seen her before. Bill Wong's office door stood slightly ajar. She pushed it open. Bill looked up with a tired, apologetic expression, the sort that invariably softened her even when she didn't want it to. Agatha, he sighed, I thought you might come. Thought, she snapped. Bill, half the village is gathering torches and pitchforks because Wilkes has the detective instincts of a boiled cabbage. Bill, Rosie is already home, but the village still thinks she's guilty. You need to clear her name. Bill scrubbed a hand over his face. I don't have the authority to countermand him. Nonsense, Agatha said. You're the only sensible one in this building. Which is exactly why I must tread carefully, Bill replied. Wilkes is shouting about malicious intent and public safety. If I push too hard, he'll double down. Agatha planted her hands on his desk. Rosie is frightened, terrified, and entirely innocent. I believe she's innocent, Bill said quietly, but belief isn't evidence. Agatha blinked, surprised. You do? Of course, but unless you can produce something concrete, Wilkes will keep her in holding until he can parade her before the press. Agatha made a growling sound unbecoming for a middle-aged woman in a tailored skirt. I will not allow it. Please don't do anything rash, Bill said. Wilkes is already muttering about you. Good, Agatha snapped. Let him mutter. She stormed out before Bill could finish a sentence. Rage propelled her all the way back to Carsely. By the time she marched up Rosie Thorne's garden path, her temper was sharp enough to slice jam jars in half. The cottage door was unlocked. Typical Rosie, sweet, soft, and entirely unaware of the viciousness of the world. Agatha stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The little lounge was painfully neat, every cushion plumped as though apologizing for existing. "Rosie?" Agatha called. Silence answered. Hodge, who had slipped in behind her on silent paws, gave a disdainful sniff around the skirting boards. He clearly felt the decor lacked imagination. "Well, don't judge," Agatha muttered. "Some people like beige." She sat down and took out the black notebook she had already taken from Rosie the night before. This time she flipped through it slowly, studying every line. Dates, times, quick panicked sketches of windows and doors, the repeated phrase, "the visitor," underlined again and again, notes about tapping at the glass, shapes moving near the hedge, and small things missing from the larder. It wasn't imagination, it was a pattern. Someone had been circling Rosie's life for weeks. Agatha felt a cold ripple along her spine. This was no nervous imagination. Rosie had been stalked for weeks. "So," Agatha murmured, "our timid baker has a real enemy." A floorboard creaked behind her. She whirled. Charles Fraith leaned casually against the doorframe, wearing an expression of mild amusement and far too much ease for a man who had just crept into someone else's cottage. "Breaking and entering now, Agatha," he drawled. "You do keep life interesting." "What on earth are you doing here?" she demanded. "Following you, naturally. You stormed through the village like a woman about to commit arson. I was intrigued." "This is serious, Charles." "So I gathered," he said, eyeing the notebook. "Rosie's been receiving nocturnal admirers." "Not admirers," Agatha said sharply. "Someone is tormenting her. Look at this." He skimmed a page, expression shifting from amusement to something more sober. "Good Lord, she should have told someone." "She was frightened," Agatha said, "and Wilkes's idiotic arrest has made everything worse." "Do you think the stranger at the fête was the same visitor?" Charles asked. Agatha considered. It fitted neatly. Too neatly, perhaps. "Possibly. Doris Simpson said she saw someone lurking behind the WI tent. Everyone assumed he was after Wilkes. But what if Rosie was the real target?" "Hardly glamorous motives," Charles murmured. "Who stalks a woman for the thrilling crime of baking scones?" "Someone who wants her frightened," Agatha said. "Or silent." Charles raised a brow. "Silent about what?" Agatha opened her mouth and froze. The front door clicked. Rosie's voice floated in, thin and exhausted. "Is someone there?" She stepped in and gasped at the sight of them. "Mrs. Raisin! Mr. Fraith, what a—" Agatha lifted the notebook. "We need to talk." Rosie wilted into tears. Charles handed her a handkerchief with the gentle grace of someone accustomed to drama. "I didn't want to bother anyone," Rosie whispered. "I know people think I'm silly. I thought it would stop." "Threatening notes? Footsteps? Missing food? That doesn't stop," Agatha said. "Why didn't you tell Bill?" Rosie twisted the handkerchief. "I didn't want to seem hysterical. People already think I'm a bit soft." Agatha's temper softened. She knew that particular shame, of fearing one's own vulnerability more than the world's cruelty. "Rosie, listen to me. Whoever is doing this isn't harmless. And the arrest," Rosie burst out, "it saved me. I know it. Someone wanted to frighten me into silence, and now everyone's looking at Wilkes instead." Agatha exchanged a glance with Charles. "Silence about what?" Rosie hesitated. "I can't say. Not yet." Agatha resisted the urge to shake her. Fear made people foolish, but secrets made them targets. "Rosie, you must trust me," she said. "Someone tried to use Wilkes as a distraction. This isn't about him at all. It's about you." Rosie shivered. "I know." Another tear slid down her cheek. Charles, surprisingly gentle, squeezed her shoulder. "We'll sort this," he said. Agatha snapped her notebook shut. "Right, enough dithering. I'm taking this, and I'm going to find your stalker." Rosie's eyes widened. "You? But the police?" "The police currently consist of Wilkes, who thinks walnuts are lethal weapons. No thank you." Rosie managed a thin laugh. Agatha rose, determination flaring. "I don't care what Wilkes thinks. If he wants to arrest me next, let him try." Charles followed her to the door. "Planning to drag me into this, are you?" "Of course," Agatha muttered. "You're useful in small doses." "Charming." "Shut up and come on." Outside, dusk settled over Carsely like a damp blanket. The village hedges rustled in the breeze, but Agatha no longer mistook every rustle for wind. Somewhere in this quiet place, Someone watched Rosie. Someone crept along hedgerows and tapped at windows. Agatha lit a cigarette. Smoke curled upward, defiant in the heavy air. "I'm going to protect her," she said, "even if the police won't." Hodge appeared from the hedge, tail high, as if marking the end of their declaration. "Exactly," Agatha said to him. "This time we're taking matters into our own hands." She strode into the gathering night, Charles beside her, Hodge following with the weary dignity of a cat accustomed to human idiocy. Tomorrow she would start hunting, and she hoped, fervently, that the stalker wasn't already hunting back. A thin grey drizzle drifted over Carsely by morning, the sort that gave hedgerows a damp sulk and left cottage windows misty with half-hearted condensation. Agatha Raisin stood in Rosie Thorne's narrow garden path, tapping one foot impatiently while Charles Fraith wrestled an umbrella that seemed personally offended by the weather. She'd dragged him out early, insisting on retracing Rosie's footsteps from the previous week. Charles looked as though he regretted every moment of friendship that had brought him here. "Honestly, Agatha," he muttered, "the rain is biblical. Couldn't we interview suspects somewhere indoors? Preferably with heating." "Crime doesn't pause for drizzle," Agatha said. She inspected the larder door, frowning at the faint scrapes around the lock. "Rosie said someone tried to force it." "Scrape marks could be anything. Faulty key, overzealous postman." "Don't be obtuse," Agatha snapped. "This is deliberate." Charles sighed, stepping back as she crouched. Her knees cracked audibly. She ignored them with heroic dignity. Something white glinted in the grass. Agatha reached for it, a snapped twig. Not unusual on its own, but this one was wedged oddly, as though broken under weight. Beside it, half buried in mud, lay a clear boot print. "There," Agatha said triumphantly. "You see? Someone was here." Charles peered down. "Big boot. Could belong to anyone. Alf Bloxby wears a similar size." "Alf Bloxby doesn't lurk at night tapping on windows," Agatha said. "You never know," Charles mused. "He may have hidden depths." Agatha straightened and brushed mud from her hands. Then she saw the most chilling detail yet. A walnut shell perched neatly on the kitchen windowsill. It sat there like a small, smug insult. "Now that," she breathed, "is intentional. Pure intimidation." Charles studied it. A single walnut shell. It hardly screams menace. "It screams something," Agatha said. "Rosie's visitor is escalating." Hodge, having followed them at a leisurely pace from the cottage gate, sniffed the base of the wall with disdain. He flicked his tail, evidently concluding that whomever they hunted was beneath his notice. Agatha felt a renewed surge of determination. This was no nervous fancy. Rosie had a stalker, and the stalker wanted fear. Agatha despised fear. It reminded her uncomfortably of loneliness. "Come on," she said. "We're asking around." They trekked to the village shop, where the bell above the door tinkled with the resigned tone of something long tired of its job. Inside, the shelves smelt of tea, rubber boots, and gossip. Mrs. Friedman presided behind the counter, sorting a stack of catalogues with the air of someone who enjoyed news far more than goods. "Morning, Mrs. Raisin," she said, eyeing Agatha's damp hair. "Rain caught you, I see." "Never mind the rain," Agatha said. "I need information." "Of course you do," Mrs. Friedman murmured. "Whole village is talking about Rosie. Shame about her poor nerves." "She's innocent," Agatha said, "but someone is targeting her. Did you notice anything odd lately?" Mrs. Friedman's eyes sharpened. "Well, she did argue with her cousin Eric last week. Loudly, too. Something about inheritance papers." He stormed out, muttering. "Inheritance?" Agatha repeated. "Rosie never said a word." "She's not the type to advertise trouble," Mrs. Friedman said, but Eric looked cross enough to chew nails. A promising red herring, Agatha thought. People rarely argued calmly over money. Alf Bloxby entered the shop, shaking water from his coat. He nodded amiably. "Morning, Mrs. Raisin. Nasty business with Rosie." "You know anything about it?" Agatha asked. "Not much, but there was a salesman about last week, stranger. Kept asking odd questions about villagers, particularly about Rosie's childhood." Alf shrugged. "Seemed nosy, not local. I remember because he bought the cheapest biscuits we stock. Suspicious behaviour, that." "Description?" Agatha pressed. "Tallish. Brown coat. Nervous eyes." Alf considered. Hair like it had argued with a comb. Agatha stored it away. Useful clue or another village exaggeration? Hard to tell. At that moment, Bill Wong pushed through the shop door, his expression already apologetic. Agatha braced herself. "Agatha," he said quietly, "Wilkes is furious you're asking questions. He says you're obstructing justice." "Wilkes wouldn't recognize justice if it danced naked in his kitchen," Agatha retorted. "And what justice? Arresting an innocent woman?" Bill winced. "I agree this doesn't feel right, but you must let us handle it." "Handle it?" Agatha snapped. "Wilkes is handling it like a drunken rhinoceros." Mrs. Friedman gasped. Alf stifled a laugh. Bill rubbed his forehead. "Just be careful," he said. "I don't want you dragged into trouble." "Trouble and I are old acquaintances," Agatha said, "but thank you." Bill left with a final anxious glance. Agatha watched him go, fond despite her irritation. He was good, but Wilkes overshadowed him like mildew. Outside, the drizzle thickened. Agatha and Charles trekked to Eric Thorne's cottage on the edge of Carsely. The place had the shabby air of someone who never worried about appearances. The garden was choked with weeds. A rusted bicycle leaned against the porch. Eric opened the door after much shuffling. He was pale, sweaty, and defensive before they even spoke. "What do you want?" "We're asking about Rosie," Agatha said crisply. "Oh, her," Eric wiped his brow. "Look, I didn't do anything. She's always been dramatic. Too active an imagination, if you ask me." Agatha bristled. "Rosie is frightened, not fancying things." "She attracts trouble," Eric insisted. "Always has. And if she said someone was lurking, she probably misunderstood." "Did you argue with her?" Charles asked mildly. Eric reddened. "Family disagreements. None of your business." "Threatening disagreements?" Agatha asked. "No, just finances." Eric fumbled with his shirt collar. "Her share of inheritance is complicated. Did she tell you she abandoned family responsibilities years ago? I've handled everything since. She should be grateful." Agatha's suspicion sharpened. Defensive, sweaty, twitchy, and all perfect markers of a guilty conscience, or, annoyingly, of nothing at all. "Where were you when Wilkes choked at the fête?" she demanded. "Home," Eric said too quickly. "Alone?" "Yes." A perfect red herring, Agatha thought. Barely convincing, almost disappointing. "We'll be in touch," she said, turning on her heel. Charles followed her, amused. "You do enjoy intimidating people." "I enjoy the truth," Agatha said, "and Eric is hiding something." "Which makes him suspicious," Charles agreed, "although he also seems the type to panic if a biscuit crumbles unexpectedly." "We need more," Agatha muttered. Night fell early under thick clouds. Agatha found herself walking near Rosie's cottage again, Charles reluctantly trailing behind, Hodge trotting at a regal pace. The village quieted, though distant sounds drifted. A kettle whistle here, a door creak there. Carsely always felt smaller at night, as though holding its breath. Agatha scanned the hedgerows. Something pricked her senses. A shape shifted near the boundary of Rosie's garden, too tall for an animal, too still for a neighbour. "There," she whispered. The shadow moved. Agatha broke into a run. Her heels slipped on wet grass, but she pushed forward, breath sharp in the cold air. "Stop!" she shouted. The figure bolted. Agatha surged after it, but the ground betrayed her. A heel sank. She lurched, arms flailing, swearing colourfully. Charles caught up, panting. "Agatha, slow down! He's getting away!" "You're going to twist your ankle," Charles insisted, grabbing her arm. The figure vanished into the dark beyond the vicarage path. Agatha stood trembling with frustration. So close. Proof that the stalker existed. Real, bold, and watching Rosie. Hodge trotted up beside her, tail flicking disapprovingly, as though commenting on her lack of athletic grace. "I know," Agatha muttered. "I need better shoes." She stared into the darkness. "This ends," she said quietly. "Tomorrow we set a trap." Hodge meowed softly, as if acknowledging the hunt had truly begun, and Carsely, small and gossipy as ever, seemed to lean in to listen. Carsely endured one of those fretful, indecisive evenings where the sky couldn't decide whether to drizzle or simply sulk. Agatha Raisin stood in her kitchen, staring at the kettle as though daring it to boil faster. She hadn't slept properly since spotting that shadow by Rosie's hedge. Her nerves prickled, her temper simmered, and her cigarette smoke curled through the cottage like an irritated ghost. Hodge sat on the counter, tail twitching at every hiss of the kettle. He disliked tension. He disliked chaos. He disliked visitors. Unfortunately, visitors were exactly what Agatha was about to get. The landline shrilled. Agatha snatched it. "What now?" Roy Silver's voice exploded down the line. "Aggie, I'm 5 minutes away. Brace yourself." Agatha groaned. "Roy, I told you not to." But he had already hung up. Typical Roy. Announce catastrophe, then flee the consequences. 5 minutes later, a small hatchback screeched outside. The door flung open, and Roy emerged in a cloud of aftershave, hair gel, and London anxiety. "Darling," he cried, tottering to the door with 2 overstuffed bags and a ridiculous silver case. "You won't believe the traffic. I nearly died 3 times." "Shame," Agatha muttered, stepping aside. "What's in that absurd box?" Roy lifted the silver case reverently. "My mobile fax machine. Portable. Advanced. Essential for crisis management." "We're solving a stalking case, not hosting a corporate retreat." Roy ignored her and swept inside. Hodge hissed and leapt off the counter, glaring with imperial outrage. "Oh, hush," Roy told him. "We all have to make sacrifices." "You'd better not be staying," Agatha warned. "Of course I'm staying," Roy said. "It's dangerous, isn't it? Someone lurking in hedgerows, tapping windows, leaving nuts about. Frightful business. I simply must help." Agatha poured herself a gin. She'd need it. A knock sounded. Charles Frayth entered, elegant even in damp weather. "Thought I'd better check on you," he said, "since you've invited chaos to stay." "Chaos invited itself," Agatha said. "Sit down. We're planning tonight's stakeout." "Stakeout?" Roy squeaked. "Nobody mentioned a stakeout. I thought we'd brainstorm inside with tea." "We're watching Rosie's cottage," Agatha said. "We need to catch the stalker." Roy paled. "Actually catch? As in real catching?" "Yes," Agatha snapped. "Do focus." They spent 20 fraught minutes devising a plan. Charles contributed detached practicality. Roy contributed nervous flapping. Agatha contributed determination sharpened by fury at Wilkes and fear for Rosie. She would not let some lurking menace torment a timid baker. By midnight, they were installed at Rosie's cottage. The garden was wet, the hedgerow black with shadows, and the air cool enough to make Agatha's breath puff in small clouds. The 3 of them crouched behind the hedge like badly organized spies. "It's freezing," Charles murmured. "Couldn't we stake out from the village hall?" "You're here to suffer," Agatha said. "Quiet." Roy huddled in his coat. "I saw an owl. It looked murderous." "Owls aren't murderous," Agatha said. "That one was thinking about it." Hodge, who had been forced to come after yowling at being left behind, sat on Agatha's lap with his tail wrapped around himself like a judge prepared to condemn everyone present. Agatha lit a cigarette, then another. The smoke hung above the hedge like a permanent weather system. Charles coughed faintly. "Agatha, your smoking is compromising the entire stealth element." "My smoking is keeping me warm," she said, "and calm, and functioning." Hours passed. Charles dozed against the fence. Roy hummed nervously, insisting it helped him stay alert. Agatha glared into the darkness, every muscle tense. At 2 a.m. something shifted. A faint crunch on wet leaves, a shape gliding near the hedge. Agatha stiffened. "There," she whispered. "Someone's at the back door." The figure crept along Rosie's cottage wall, then paused, testing the latch. Too deliberate, too practiced. This wasn't mischief. This was someone who knew exactly what they were doing. "Get ready," Agatha hissed. Before she could advance, Charles jerked awake, flailed, and kicked the torch lying beside him. It skittered across stones and struck a plant pot with a loud clatter. "Oh, brilliant," Agatha hissed. The shadow bolted. Agatha leapt up and gave chase, heart thumping, coat flapping behind her. Her shoes slipped on the wet path, but she pressed forward. She was older, yes, but fury provided remarkable propulsion. The figure darted past the hedge, through the side path and towards the vicarage lane. Agatha almost caught an arm, but the stalker twisted and vanished into darkness. She stopped, breathless and livid. Charles caught up, panting. Roy stumbled behind, wheezing complaints about rural life and cardiac emergencies. "We almost had them," Agatha snapped. "If someone hadn't performed a midnight ballet with a torch." "Terribly sorry," Charles said, still half asleep. "That person knew exactly where to go," Agatha murmured. "Not random, not opportunistic, planned." A window opened. Mrs. Bloxby peered out in a dressing gown and slippers, expression gentle even at 2 in the morning. "Mrs. Raisin, are you all right?" Agatha regained her composure. "Fine. We were pursuing a villain." "Oh dear," Mrs. Blocksby said. "Would you like tea?" Even at 2 a.m., the vicar's wife emanated calm. They followed her into the warm kitchen. The kettle hissed. Hodge settled on the vicarage doormat as if claiming sanctuary. Mrs. Blocksby poured tea and listened without interrupting. When Agatha finished, she nodded thoughtfully. "This doesn't sound like a stranger," she said. "The way he moved, the familiarity. Whoever this is, they know Rosie's patterns." Agatha leaned back. "Exactly. Someone close. Someone who knows her habits." Charles nodded. "Not just lurking randomly." Roy clutched his mug. "I don't like this countryside. Give me Covent Garden any day." Mrs. Blocksby smiled kindly. "Fear often grows in quiet places. It has room." Agatha felt a small chill at that. When they left, the drizzle had eased. Agatha walked back towards Rosie's cottage, scanning the ground for anything the stalker might have dropped. Hodge padded beside her, nose twitching. Then Agatha saw it. A small metal glint near the hedge. She crouched, lifted it, and held it under the dim street lamp. A key, silver, stamped MT Storage. Her heart quickened. A clue. Something tangible. Charles leaned in. "What's that?" "A key," Agatha said, "dropped by someone in a hurry. MT Storage." "Never heard of it," Charles murmured. "I'll find it," Agatha said, "before Wilkes misinterprets it as evidence of a village-wide walnut conspiracy." Hodge meowed as if agreeing. They returned to Agatha's cottage just after 3. Roy staggered inside dramatically, claiming near hypothermia. Hodge leapt onto his favourite armchair, reclaiming territory after the indignity of Roy's presence. Agatha peeled off her damp jacket and poured herself a gin, exhaustion slipping over her bones like a heavy shawl. Her eyes burned, her feet ached, but triumph warmed her chest. A real clue. Proof the stalker wasn't a figment. Charles lingered near the door. "You should rest." "I will," Agatha said. "Be careful," Charles added. "This person isn't harmless." "I'm not harmless either," Agatha muttered. Charles smiled. "True." He left with an elegant wave. Agatha slumped into her chair. Hodge climbed onto her lap with reluctant affection, kneading her coat as though preparing dough. "We're on to something," Agatha whispered to him. "This key means something. MT Storage. We'll unravel it." Hodge blinked. Unimpressed. Agatha stroked him anyway. Fatigue weighed on her, but beneath it lay something sharper. Purpose. Someone had frightened Rosie. Someone had skulked around cottages and hedgerows. Someone was bold enough to return. Now Agatha had their trail. She set her empty glass down, listened to the quiet hum of the cottage, and let herself enjoy one small moment of victory. Tomorrow, she would find that storage unit. Tomorrow, she would get ahead of Wilkes. Tomorrow, she would hunt the truth. But for now, with Hodge purring faintly against her stomach, she simply closed her eyes and let the night rest around her like a tired but loyal friend. Morning arrived with a chilly bite, the sort of thin Cotswold cold that made roofs shine pale silver and left hedgerows stooped under dew. Agatha Raisin stood outside her cottage, clutching a too-hot mug of tea and glowering at the sky as if suspicious weather were personally out to sabotage her. Hodge sat on the step, tail wrapped around him like a judge assessing the morning and finding it wanting. "We're going to Moreton in Marsh," Agatha told him. "Do try to behave." Hodge blinked in the slow, disdainful manner that suggested her plans were beneath feline dignity. Charles Frayth's vintage convertible pulled up a moment later, engine purring. Charles leaned out, sunglasses far too stylish for the grey morning. "Ready for adventure?" he asked lightly. "Ready to find this blasted MT Storage," Agatha said. "Drive, and no teasing." "Teasing?" Charles replied. "I never tease. I merely observe." Agatha slid into the passenger seat with a grunt. Hodge, refusing to be left behind after last night's excitement, claimed the back like royalty. Charles raised a brow. "Bringing him?" "He's moral support," Agatha said. "Better than Roy." They set off. The road wound through misty fields and sleepy lanes, the sort of countryside that looked idyllic until one remembered how many crimes, secrets, and unpleasant events Agatha had personally uncovered within a 10-mile radius. By the time they reached Moreton in Marsh, sunlight had begun to pierce the clouds in half-hearted streaks. There, Charles said, pointing to a set of squat storage units behind a mechanic's workshop. A peeling sign read MT Storage. The lettering looked as though it had been painted by someone with shaky hands and limited patience. Agatha's pulse quickened. This is it. They parked beside the units. An attendant sat in a small cabin, reading a newspaper and radiating boredom. Agatha strode up before Charles could protest. "Good morning," she announced with impressive confidence. "We're here for Unit 12, Sensitive Antiques." The attendant looked up, unimpressed. "Name?" "Fraith," Agatha said, gesturing to Charles. Charles opened his mouth to object, but she dug her heel discreetly into his toe. He closed it again. The attendant shrugged, unlocked a drawer, and retrieved a ledger. "Sign here, then." Agatha signed with a flourish that bore no resemblance to Charles's signature. The attendant didn't even glance at it. He handed them a key and waved vaguely at the row of units. "Be careful," he said. "Door sticks." "Don't they all?" Agatha muttered. They found Unit 12 halfway down the row. The metal door groaned open reluctantly, as though offended at being disturbed. The interior smelt of dust, old cardboard, and faintly of walnuts. Agatha clicked on her torch. The beam cut through the dim space, revealing boxes stacked neatly at the back. Something about the orderliness unsettled her. Stalkers shouldn't be neat. "Let's see," she murmured. The first box contained walnuts, not a few, dozens. Shells, halves, whole nuts, even a small bag marked roasted. The sight made Agatha's stomach tighten. "So the walnut trail wasn't an accident," she said. "This person's fixated." Charles crouched beside her. Nut enthusiasts are rarely threatening. "This isn't enthusiasm," Agatha said. "It's taunting." The second box was worse. Photographs, dozens of them. Rosie Thorne as a teenager, hand shyly half-raised, smile uncertain. Some photos showed her at a school fete, others outside an old cottage, all taken from a distance as if by someone who preferred observing her unnoticed. Agatha felt a cold shiver slide up her spine. Someone has followed her for years. Charles nodded grimly. This is obsession, deep and unpleasant. Agatha opened another folder. A stack of letters sat tied with string. They were addressed to Margaret. The handwriting was jagged, frantic. She lifted one and scanned it. "Who's Margaret?" Charles asked. Agatha swallowed. "Rosie. Margaret must be her birth name." "She changed it," Charles said, eyebrows rising. "Seems so." Agatha flicked through the letters, her heart tightening. Words like "you can't hide, you were meant for me," and "I always find you" peppered the pages. The final envelope held a single sheet with a rough draft of a threatening note. "You cannot hide forever." Agatha placed it down carefully, anger rising like a tide. This isn't some local troublemaker. This is someone with history. Charles softened. Poor Rosie. "We need to confront her," Agatha said. "Now." As they shut the storage unit, Hodge padded out from the back seat, sniffing the air with his usual air of judgment. "Don't give me that look," Agatha muttered. "I agree. It's nasty." Back in Carsely, they went straight to Rosie's cottage. The timid baker opened the door with red-rimmed eyes, her hands twisting a tea towel. "Mrs. Raisin," she whispered. "Did something happen?" "We need to talk," Agatha said gently. Inside, Rosie perched on the sofa, bracing herself. Charles remained near the door, giving her space. Agatha sat opposite her with a softness she rarely allowed anyone to see. "Rosie," she said, "tell me the truth. Your real name is Margaret, isn't it?" Rosie flinched, tears welling instantly. Please." "We found a storage unit," Agatha continued, "with walnuts, photos of you as a girl, letters, threats. This isn't recent. This has been going on for years." Rosie's breath hitched. "I didn't want anyone to know. I changed my name when we moved. I thought it was over." Charles stepped closer. "Over from what?" Rosie wiped her eyes. "There was a boy, Martin Tukes. We were friends at first. He was lonely. I felt sorry for him. Then he attached himself. Too much. He followed me everywhere. Then he started saying strange things. Dark things." "Threatening?" Agatha asked. Rosie nodded. "My parents moved us away after he cornered me behind the school and said he'd never let me go. When he disappeared a few months later, I thought maybe he'd forgotten me." "He didn't," Agatha said softly. Rosie shook her head. "I started getting letters in my teens, then he stopped. For years, nothing. I thought he was dead, but last month, little things began again." "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Agatha asked. "People would think I was mad." Rosie lowered her gaze. "People already say things." Agatha's chest tightened. She knew that brand of loneliness intimately, the desperation not to be dismissed, the fear of being thought dramatic. "Rosie," she said, voice gentler, "you should have trusted someone. I didn't want to burden anyone." "Burden?" Agatha scoffed. "You're worth far more than you think." A knock shattered the moment. Bill Wong stood at the door, expression grim. "Agatha," he said, "I've just come from Mercester. Wilkes is furious. He says you've interfered with evidence." "Oh, do shut up about Wilkes," Agatha snapped. "We've finally found something useful." Bill entered, took one look at Rosie's tear-streaked face, another at the folder on the table, and softened. "What did you find?" Agatha explained briskly, pushing the most incriminating items forward. Bill listened, jaw tightening. "Martin Tukes," he murmured. "I've heard that name. Local rumour said he died years ago." "Rumours are often wrong," Agatha said, "especially in this area." Bill nodded. "You should have come to me, but thank you. This matters." "Wilkes won't believe it," Agatha said. "He'll probably arrest me next." "I'll handle Wilkes," Bill said quietly. "As much as I can." They fell into a tense silence. Rosie sobbed softly, clutching a cushion like a lifeline. Agatha and Charles exchanged glances. The pieces of Rosie's quiet suffering made cruel sense. Bill cleared his throat. "There's something else. I checked hospital records. Martin Tukes was recently released 6 months ago from a psychiatric facility near Cheltenham." Rosie gasped. Bill continued, voice low. "He was spotted in Moreton-in-Marsh last month." Agatha felt a chill race down her spine. The walnuts, the letters, the shadow, the storage unit. Martin Tukes wasn't dead. He was close. "Rosie," Agatha said gently, "we'll protect you." Rosie clung to her sleeve. "I'm so scared." Agatha squeezed her hand. "Fear is natural, but you're not alone." Charles placed a supportive hand on Rosie's shoulder. Bill closed the letters with solemn care. Hodge hopped onto the sofa, curling beside Rosie as if offering dignified comfort. Rosie burst into grateful tears. Agatha looked at the frightened woman, then at the door, then at the night beyond the windows. The game had shifted. The hunter had returned, and Agatha Raisin, vain, stubborn, furious, would not let him win. The next morning dawned in a thin wash of pearly grey, the sort of colour that made the Cotswolds look washed out and weary. Agatha Raisin stood at her kitchen sink, staring at her reflection in the window. Her hair looked rebellious. Her mood looked worse. Hodge sat nearby on the windowsill, tail flicking with superior aloofness. He disliked mornings. Agatha sympathised. After the revelations about Martin Tukes, sleep had fled from her cottage like a burglar sensing danger. She had paced half the night, chain-smoking by the back door, replaying Rosie's shaking voice. The letters, the storage unit, the shadow at the hedge. Martin, recently released somewhere nearby. Bill arrived just after 9, looking as though he'd had even less rest than she had. His expression combined worry with weary resignation. "Agatha," he said, "more news. I phoned around. Martin Tukes has no fixed address, no family contact. He works odd jobs, kitchens, warehouses, bits and pieces, moves every few months. Nobody knows where he's living now." "So he could be here," Agatha said. "Yes," Bill admitted, "or he could be miles away. But someone saw him in Moreton recently." "He's come back," Agatha said, "to claim Rosie." Bill frowned. "We don't know that." "We do," Agatha said, "because this is Carsely, and nothing ever stays politely buried." She poured Bill tea, though her hands trembled slightly. Hodge watched with narrow eyes, clearly convinced something dreadful lurked in the teapot. "Please promise me," Bill said softly, "that you won't run at him with a frying pan or something equally dangerous." "Don't be ridiculous," Agatha said. "I don't even own a decent frying pan." Bill exhaled deeply, which she found insulting. By late afternoon, Agatha dragged Charles to the Red Lion for intel gathering, which Charles translated as drinking. The pub was packed. Whether from boredom or fear, Carsely always flocked to the Red Lion when trouble brewed. Agatha liked to imagine they came for her updates specifically, but she suspected beer was the real draw. Doris Simpson whispered loudly near the darts board. "I always said Rosie was strange. Changing her name. You know what that means. Means her parents had sense, muttered Mrs. Friedman. Means she's hiding guilt, Doris insisted. Why else change a name? Agatha slammed her glass down. Doris, changing a name doesn't mean guilt. Some people prefer not to spend their lives being called things like Mildred or Ethel. My Aunt Ethel was a saint, Doris snapped. My condolences, Agatha said. Charles hid a laugh behind his pint. At another table, Alf Bloxby and a few local men speculated loudly about Wilkes. He should arrest himself, Alf said. Crime against common sense. The man can't tell a walnut from a weapon, someone added. Well, he nearly choked, another said. Yes, Agatha muttered, and the village nearly celebrated. Charles nudged her. You're enjoying this. I am not, she lied. I'm furious, and tired, and a little peckish. They left before Doris could corner them with further theories involving jam and devilry. Agatha decided they needed more concrete information. They drove to a small village outside Evesham, where an elderly neighbour of the Tukes family still lived. Mrs. Cleaver answered her door with a face like a startled owl and the voice of someone who had smoked since the war. Martin Tukes, she croaked. Haven't heard that name in yonks. Quiet boy. Well, quiet until he wasn't. Agatha leaned in. Define wasn't. Mrs. Cleaver sniffed. Got odd. Talked to himself. Poor boy. He had a terrible walnut allergy. His mother kept them out of the house because even the smell made him swell up. Agatha and Charles exchanged glances. Did he have friends? Charles asked. No, only that girl, Margaret. Pretty thing. Too kind, if you ask me. Mrs. Cleaver lowered her voice. He got obsessed. You could see it. Stared at her through the hedge. Left things for her. Once left a dead bird. And always with those walnuts. Agatha shivered. Rosie's fears had not been exaggerations. They thanked Mrs. Cleaver and retreated to the car. Rosie was right to be terrified, Agatha said quietly. Charles nodded. This Martin fellow sounds unstable. Unstable and back, Agatha said. Perhaps. Definitely. Charles didn't argue, which she found annoying. She preferred winning debates she started. Back in Carsely, the drizzle thickened, giving everything a faint sheen of gloom. Agatha felt it settle on her mood like damp wool. She returned home to find Roy Silver pacing her kitchen, waving an empty biscuit tin. Darling, Roy cried, there's no sugar, and the biscuits are gone, and your cat hates me. He hates everyone, Agatha said. What now? Roy clasped his hands dramatically. I saw him. Agatha froze. Saw who? Martin, Roy squealed, in Mercester Market, at the vegetable stall, buying carrots. Carrots, Aggie, carrots, we must act. You're sure? She demanded. Of course I'm sure. He looked exactly how you described. Gaunt, troubled, hair like a hurricane survivor. Agatha grabbed her coat. We're going. Charles arrived just in time to be dragged along. They drove to Mercester, Roy describing every second of his sighting with theatrical detail. Agatha's nerves coiled into a tense wire. They found Martin near the covered market, standing alone beside a stack of apples. He looked tired. Gaunt, yes, but not wild. His clothes were worn. His eyes darted nervously. Agatha marched up to him. Martin Tukes. He blinked. Yes? I'm Agatha Raisin. I know about Rosie, or Margaret, and I know you've been following her. Martin looked startled, then ashamed. I haven't harmed her. I would never harm her. You've terrified her, Agatha snapped. I know, he murmured. That's why I wanted to see her. Apologize. Make things right. Stalking is not making things right, Agatha said. I haven't been stalking her, he insisted softly. Not recently. I wrote letters years ago, but I stopped. I've been trying to get better. Agatha's anger faltered. This didn't match the obsessive tone of the letters in the storage unit. Someone has left walnuts at Rosie's, she said. We found them. His eyes widened with something like panic. Walnuts? No, I can't. I can't go near walnuts. I'm allergic. Terribly. They make me swell up. Agatha blinked. You're allergic? Yes, Martin said. My whole life. I carry medicine. Ask anyone. He reached into his pocket and produced a small inhaler-like device. I keep this always. Charles leaned closer. He's telling the truth. Look at his reaction. Agatha's mind raced. The storage unit, the walnuts, the shell on the windowsill. It couldn't be Martin. "Did you rent a storage unit in Morton?" she asked. Martin shook his head vigorously. "No, I've been staying in Cheltenham, working at a warehouse. I came here for work, and to maybe write Rosie a letter, a kind one, not like before." His words carried no menace, only regret. Agatha stepped back, confusion stirring like a cold wind. If Martin hadn't used walnuts and he hadn't followed Rosie recently, then the stalker wasn't him. She exchanged a long look with Charles. His eyebrows lifted. A red herring, a convincing one, too convincing. "Go home," Agatha said tersely, "and don't go near Rosie." "I won't," Martin whispered. They walked away. Roy kept glancing back with dramatic shivers. "He seemed harmless," Roy said. "Well, mostly harmless." "He's not the one," Agatha muttered. "Not this time." "Then who?" Charles asked softly. Agatha didn't answer. Her mind replayed every clue, the storage unit, the letters, the walnuts, the shadow fleeing. Martin had a history, yes, but the walnuts alone ruled him out. Whoever stalked Rosie wanted to frighten her, wanted to control the narrative, wanted to frame Martin. Agatha's chest tightened. Someone else was behind this, someone closer, someone with their own reason. As they returned to the car, drizzle pattering lightly on their shoulders, Agatha drew a deep breath. If Martin wasn't the danger, then the real danger was still in Carsely, still watching, still planning. She lit a cigarette, exhaled slowly, and felt Hodge brush against her leg in silent warning. The walnuts had lied, and Agatha Raisin hated being misled. Carsely woke beneath a pale curtain of drizzle, the sort that dampened chimneys and made roses sulk. Agatha Raisin marched down the lane with her coat clutched tight, cigarette in hand, mood somewhere between irritable and murderous. Hodge trotted behind her with reluctant dignity, pausing every few steps to shake off droplets as if personally insulted by British weather. Martin's innocence, at least regarding the walnuts, had lodged itself in Agatha's mind overnight like a pebble in a shoe. She hated being wrong. More than that, she hated someone using a vulnerable man's past as a weapon. Someone in Carsely was manipulating the story, nudging suspicion exactly where they wanted it. And Agatha couldn't stand manipulation unless she was the one doing it. She turned toward the vicarage. Mrs. Bloxby, wise as always, had quietly asked her to come. Agatha arrived damp, annoyed, and craving tea. Mrs. Bloxby welcomed her with that serene smile that made Agatha feel simultaneously soothed and judged. "You look tired, Mrs. Raisin." "I'm being hunted by lunatics," Agatha said. "Of course I'm tired." They moved to the warm kitchen. Mrs. Bloxby poured tea while Hodge curled smugly near the radiator. "I've been thinking," Mrs. Bloxby began gently. "Rosie may have told you more than she told me, but there is something she once shared years ago that may be relevant." Agatha straightened. "Go on." "Before she came to Carsely, Rosie worked at a care home in Evesham," Mrs. Bloxby said. "She reported a senior volunteer for mistreating residents. There was an inquiry. The volunteer was dismissed, with humiliation." Agatha tapped ash neatly into Mrs. Bloxby's tidy saucer. "Name?" "Harriet Plowson." Agatha finished her tea in 3 gulps. "Right, I'm off." "Please be kind," Mrs. Bloxby said softly. "People break in different ways." Agatha snorted. "I'll be very kind if she isn't trying to terrorize Rosie. If she is, I'll be something else entirely." Agatha and Charles headed for Evesham. Charles drove, elegant even in drizzle. Agatha smoked furiously, planning questions sharp enough to peel paint. Harriet Plowson lived in a prim bungalow painted a shade of beige that suggested both restraint and suppressed rage. She opened the door with a brittle smile that cracked almost immediately when Agatha introduced herself. "I knew someone would come eventually," Harriet said. Her voice trembled with wounded pride. "The village never forgets anything." "We're not here about your reputation," Agatha said briskly. "We're investigating harassment directed at someone you once worked with." Harriet's expression twitched. "Rosie?" "Yes," Agatha said. Harriet ushered them in. The bungalow was immaculate, every cushion aggressively plumped, every lampshade straight. A faint scent of disinfectant lingered in the air like a moral stance. "People exaggerated," Harriet said stiffly. "Those residents needed firm guidance." Charles gave her a mild, aristocratic look that could melt steel. "Firm guidance is not the same as mistreatment." Harriet's brittle smile snapped. "It was 20 years ago. I've rebuilt my life." "And yet you still talk about it," Agatha observed. A silence stretched. Then Agatha noticed something on the counter, a decorative bowl filled with walnuts, whole, polished, placed neatly. Her pulse quickened. "You like walnuts?" Agatha asked casually. "They're healthy," Harriet said sharply. "Good fats." Beside the door, a pair of muddy boots rested on a mat, large, sturdy, with a distinct pattern on the sole. Agatha recognized it instantly, the same pattern she'd seen in the mud by Rosie's larder door. Agatha exchanged a glance with Charles. Harriet noticed, her composure cracking like thin porcelain. "You think I'd stalk Rosie?" Harriet snapped. "I'm not a monster." "Opportunity and motive," Agatha said. "You lost your position because of her." Harriet's eyes filled suddenly. "I lost everything. I wasn't perfect, but I cared. They treated me like some wicked witch. Rosie never understood the pressure I was under." Her voice wavered, then broke entirely. Harriet collapsed into a chair, shoulders shaking. Agatha stood awkwardly. She disliked tears in others. They stirred uncomfortable thoughts about her own. "Did you threaten her?" Agatha asked, softer than expected. "No," Harriet sobbed. "I was angry but not cruel. I haven't seen her in years. I only kept those boots for gardening. I don't leave my house after dusk." Agatha checked the boots again. Dry mud. Completely wrong colour for Rosie's hedge. The footprint had been similar, but the soil was wrong. A well-crafted red herring. "I believe you," Agatha said reluctantly. Harriet looked up, surprised. "You do?" "You're dramatic, not dangerous," Agatha muttered. Charles hid a smile behind his hand. They left Harriet's bungalow feeling strangely deflated. Agatha lit a cigarette on the pavement. "She wasn't lying," Agatha said. "Just guilty, overwhelmed, and melodramatic." "Sound familiar?" Charles asked lightly. Agatha glared at him. Back in Carsely, drizzle thickened. Agatha returned to her cottage, exhausted. Roy lay sprawled on the sofa like an overdressed Roman emperor eating crisps. "Darling," he exclaimed, "you look like someone's hit you with a soaked newspaper." "Harriet Plowson is innocent," Agatha snapped. "Shock twist," Roy said. "So who's tormenting Rosie now?" Agatha reached for Rosie's notebook, the one she'd taken from under the cushion days ago. She'd skimmed it before but never studied it properly. Now she opened it with fresh suspicion. Hodge jumped onto the armchair beside her, staring at the pages as if offering unrivaled feline wisdom. The entries described tapping hands, strange questions, missing tins, odd noises. But Agatha's eyes narrowed at something else entirely. The handwriting. Long strokes, heavy pressure, letters that leaned sharply to the right. A small flick in the lowercase g. She knew this handwriting. Where had she seen it? Then she remembered. A form she'd handled earlier that week. A paper Rosie had signed. No, someone connected to Rosie had signed. Eric, Rosie's cousin. Agatha's heart thudded. She rummaged through her handbag, pulling out the charity sign-up sheet she'd grabbed from the fête after Doris shoved it at her. Eric had signed near the top. She laid it beside the notebook. Same scrawl, same slanted G, same heavy-handed strokes. "Charles!" Agatha yelled. Charles entered, coat half on. "What now?" Agatha thrust the papers at him. "The handwriting. Look." He examined the two sheets. His eyes widened. "They match." "Eric wrote the notes," Agatha said. "Eric frightened Rosie. Eric planted walnuts. Eric framed Martin." Roy gasped theatrically. "The cousin? The boring, sweaty one?" "Yes," Agatha said. "His motive?" Charles tapped the notebook thoughtfully. "Inheritance." "Exactly," Agatha said. "Rosie's parents left her a modest trust. Eric manages it. If Rosie begins therapy, moves, or makes certain financial decisions, the funds shift. If she challenges him, she'd uncover irregularities." "Irregularities?" Roy echoed, delighted. "As in fraud?" "As in Eric lining his pockets for years," Agatha said. "And if Rosie discovered it, he'd lose everything," Charles finished. Agatha nodded grimly. He needed her scared, silent, off balance, and Martin's history was the perfect cover. Roy shuddered. "That's diabolical." Agatha paced, cigarette glowing fiercely. He planted walnuts knowing Martin couldn't go near them. He left a footprint by Rosie's cottage. He wrote her notes in disguised versions of his own hand. And he took advantage of her past to make it all believable. Charles folded his arms. "Eric is smarter than he looks." "Most villains are," Agatha muttered. She snatched her coat. "I'm going to find him." "Agatha," Charles warned, "don't confront him alone." She paused. Hodge yowled from the armchair, agreeing. Agatha sighed. "Fine. Come on, Roy, stay here, and don't eat my biscuits." "I already did," Roy said. "Of course you did," Agatha muttered. They drove through drizzle-dulled lanes toward Eric's cottage, a small, tidy place with lace curtains and overgrown privet hedges that suggested decaying pride. No car outside. Agatha knocked. No answer. She peered through the window. Empty. "He's hiding," Agatha murmured. "Or running." "Running means guilt," Charles said. Agatha lit another cigarette, exhaling her frustration. "He planned all this," she said. "Every step. Using Martin's past, exploiting Rosie's fear, manipulating police, manipulating everyone. And I fell for it." Her voice cracked, just faintly. Charles touched her shoulder. "We'll get him. You always get them." Agatha closed her eyes. Hodge rubbed against her shin with a faint, comforting rumble. The small gesture grounded her more than she'd admit. "Tomorrow," Agatha said, jaw tightening. "We finish this. Eric thinks he's clever, but he hasn't met me properly yet." She flicked her cigarette into a puddle where it hissed and died. The drizzle thickened again, soft as secrets. And Agatha Raisin, wet, furious, determined, walked back toward her cottage, already planning the trap. Morning arrived with a show of watery sunlight, though the air remained stubbornly cold. Agatha Raisin strode up the steps of Mercester Police Station with the determined gait of a woman ready to demolish stupidity with her bare hands. The automatic doors hissed open with institutional cheer, which annoyed her further. Hodge, safely at home, would have hissed back. Bill Wong met her in the foyer, already looking like he regretted getting out of bed. "Agatha, don't start anything," he murmured. "He's in a mood." "Good," Agatha snapped. "So am I." She swept past Bill and marched straight into Inspector Wilkes's office without knocking. Wilkes sat behind his desk, puffed up like an indignant pigeon in an ill-fitting suit. He had arranged papers across the desk, as though staging a photo shoot for Incompetent Weekly. "Mrs. Raisin," he began pompously, "I am preparing a press statement about the recent disturbance involving—" Agatha slapped Rosie's notebook on the desk so hard Wilkes jumped. Then she slapped the forged notes down beside it. "You're arresting the wrong person," she declared. Wilkes spluttered. "You cannot simply barge in." "You've already bumbled this investigation into farce," Agatha said. "You arrested Rosie for nearly choking you with a walnut you put in your own mouth." Bill coughed to hide a laugh. Wilkes glared. "Rosie Thorne remains a viable suspect." "She's terrified, not homicidal," Agatha said. "And the real villain is Eric, Rosie's cousin. He forged the notes. He stalked her. He planted evidence to frame Martin Tukes." Wilkes's face went a shade of puce. "You have no proof." Agatha tapped the notebook, then the sign-up sheet. Handwriting. Perfect match. Heavy strokes, slanted letters, and motive. Money. He mismanaged her inheritance and needed her compliant. Simple. Wilkes puffed out his chest. "This is circumstantial." "So were your walnuts," Agatha snapped. Charles lounged in the doorway, hands in pockets, observing the entire scene with lazy amusement. "She's right, Wilkes. You've ignored every real clue." "You, sir, are not part of this investigation," Wilkes huffed. "No one is," Agatha said, "because you haven't actually conducted one." Bill's shoulders shook with suppressed mirth. Wilkes noticed and bristled. "Sergeant Wong, control yourself." "Sorry, sir," Bill said quickly, failing entirely to look sorry. Agatha leaned forward, voice low and razor-sharp. "Eric needs to be questioned. Immediately." "Absolutely not," Wilkes said. "I shall not harass a respectable citizen because you enjoy dramatic accusations." Agatha's eyes narrowed. "You prefer neat cases because they make you feel clever. But you're not clever, Wilkes. You're a coward." Wilkes rose from his chair. "That is enough. I will not tolerate—" Agatha held up a hand. "You will tolerate a great deal before I'm done." Bill rubbed his forehead, clearly torn between admiration and dread. Agatha stormed out before Wilkes could sputter another objection. Charles followed smoothly. Bill trailed behind them, muttering apologies to every passing constable. Outside, the chilly air slapped Agatha's cheeks. She lit a cigarette, exhaled a furious cloud, and jabbed the air with one finger. "We're catching Eric ourselves." Charles grinned. "Splendid. How?" Agatha inhaled deeply. eyes bright with the reckless spark that meant trouble. "We lure him," Bill groaned. "Agatha!" "We stage a conversation that he overhears," Agatha said. "Something that makes him panic. Something that convinces him Rosie is about to expose him." "Dangerous," Charles murmured. "Effective," Agatha corrected. Bill exhaled. "Fine, but I'm coming, and we do it my way." "No," Agatha said. "We do it my way. Your way involves Wilkes, and Wilkes's way involves arresting the tea lady." They reconvened outside the Carsely village shop in late afternoon. Agatha posted Roy strategically by the notice board, Charles beside the phone box, and Bill near the hedge. Hodge thankfully remained at home. This was no place for whiskers and wanderings. Agatha positioned herself by the benches, Rosie beside her, still pale and trembling. Charles raised a brow. "You're sure she's up for this?" "I'm here," Rosie whispered. "If it helps stop him, I'll do it." Agatha placed a hand gently over hers. "You're braver than you think." Rosie managed a shaky smile. Villagers milled about, buying milk, gossiping loudly, and pretending not to stare at the peculiar arrangement of Carsely's most notorious faces. Doris Simpson hovered nearby with a carrier bag, eavesdropping like a professional. Agatha lowered her voice, speaking just loudly enough for someone lurking nearby. "Rosie," she said, "I've spoken with the solicitor. Your inheritance statements will need revisiting. We found irregularities." Rosie nodded nervously. "I didn't realize he'd taken so much." "He has," Agatha continued, "and once Bill and I submit the paperwork tomorrow, Eric will have to answer for all of it." Bill, hiding behind the hedge, grimaced. "Subtle," he mouthed. Agatha ignored him. She leaned closer, voice a little louder. "We'll expose him." There, a faint rustle. A shadow shifted behind the corner of the shop. A figure watched. Eric. Agatha's pulse sparked. He looked pale, sweaty and jumpy, the perfect portrait of guilt. He retreated quickly, trying to appear casual. Charles strolled by. He heard. "Good," Agatha murmured. "Tonight, he'll panic. And when he panics, he'll make a mistake." Bill nodded grimly. "We must be ready." "Oh, we will be," Agatha said. Roy piped up from the notice board. "Shall I look inconspicuous?" "You're wearing a pink scarf with sequins," Charles said. "You couldn't be inconspicuous if you hid behind a tractor." "It's reflective for safety," Roy snapped. Agatha sighed. "Just stand still." Night fell quickly. Cold seeped into cars and cottages. Fog drifted along the lanes like misplaced wool from an invisible sheep. Inside Rosie's cottage, tension coiled like a living thing. Agatha, Charles, Bill and Roy waited in the darkened front room. Hodge, unable to bear the stress, had been reluctantly sent home with a bowl of tuna. Agatha worried about him, but knew she'd worry more if he witnessed a confrontation. Rosie sat on the sofa, wringing her hands. "He won't come," she whispered. "He will," Agatha said. "He'll try to recover whatever evidence he's left. He'll try to scare you again, or silence you. Either way, he'll come." Roy clutched a broom like a lance. "I don't like this." "Nobody does," Charles said mildly, "but it's necessary." Bill checked his watch. "We need silence now." The cottage settled. Wind hummed faintly down the chimney. Floorboards creaked. Rosie's breath trembled. Agatha stood beside the door, tense, poised. Then footsteps. Slow. Careful. Crunching over gravel outside the back door. Rosie gasped. Bill gestured for quiet. A shadow moved past the kitchen window. A key scraped against the lock. Someone tried the handle. The back door eased open. A figure slipped inside. Eric. He crept forward, face twisted in determination and fear. He held a torch in one hand and a gloved fist clenched around something small. Agatha recognized a crumpled letter. He whispered, "Margaret, are you awake?" Agatha stepped out behind him and flicked on the overhead light. Eric froze, the color drained from his face. "Evening," Agatha said, voice sharp as a blade. Charles positioned himself by the door. Roy lifted his broom, shaking violently. Bill stepped forward, badge visible. "Eric Thorne," Bill said. "We need to talk." Eric's eyes darted wildly. This isn't... Rosie's confused." "She's terrified because of you," Agatha said. "Not Martin, you." Eric swallowed hard. "I didn't hurt her." "You stalked her," Agatha said. "You left notes, walnuts, footprints. You wrote in that notebook. You preyed on her fear." "I only needed her quiet," Eric choked out. "She was going to ruin everything." "Everything?" Charles asked. "You mean the money?" Eric collapsed into the nearest chair. His shoulders sagged. "I didn't take much. Only a little each year. She didn't need it. She'd never check. But then she started thinking about moving. Therapy, new job. She'd have to go through the accounts." "And you'd be exposed," Agatha said. Eric covered his face with shaking hands. "I just wanted her scared enough to stay put. I never meant real harm." Rosie stepped forward, trembling. "You frightened me for months." "I know," Eric whispered. "I panicked when Wilkes choked. I saw my chance. If everyone thought you'd done something, or that Martin had come back, they'd stop looking at me." Bill sighed deeply. "Eric Thorne, you are under arrest." Eric looked miserable, defeated, small. Agatha felt no triumph, only the heavy satisfaction of being right again. Wilkes chose that moment to burst through the door, puffing and panting like a winded walrus. "I heard shouting. I am in charge here." The room fell silent. Bill raised an eyebrow. "You're late, sir." "What's going on?" Wilkes demanded. Agatha folded her arms. "Confession, arrest, resolution. You've missed everything except the shouting." Wilkes blustered. "Well, I will prepare a statement immediately. This is a significant development." "You did nothing," Agatha said. "I supervised," Wilkes insisted. "From where?" Charles asked. "The pub?" Villagers had begun drifting toward the cottage, drawn by gossip. Doris Simpson, Mrs. Friedman, Alf Bloxby, all of them gathered like magpies. Every single one heard Agatha say loudly, "If you take credit for this, Wilkes, I'll personally tell the Gazette about your walnut theatrics." Wilkes turned scarlet. "That was an isolated—" "You choked on your own snack," Agatha said. "Hardly the crime of the century." The villagers chuckled openly. Even Bill couldn't hide a grin. Wilkes puffed his cheeks and retreated into blessed silence. Rosie burst into tears as Eric was led away. Agatha hugged her, stiffly but sincerely. "It's over," Agatha said. "You're safe now." Rosie whispered a shaky thank you. Hodge would have purred in approval if he'd been present. They stepped outside, greeted by villagers eager for details. Alf Bloxby shook Agatha's hand. Mrs. Friedman declared she always suspected Eric had squirrel eyes. Doris claimed she knew all along it wasn't Rosie. She simply kept quiet for dramatic effect. Roy announced loudly, "I helped by holding a broom." Agatha rolled her eyes. "Yes, Roy. Without you, justice would have faltered." Charles squeezed her shoulder. "Well done." Agatha felt a warm flicker of pleasure. Then Mrs. Friedman handed her the latest issue of the Mercester Gazette. "Your jam's on the front page," she said brightly. They called it the Fête Fiasco. Agatha's triumphant glow evaporated instantly. She snatched the paper. There she was, gaping at her mouldy jar, printed in unforgiving black and white. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she groaned. Charles laughed. Bill winced sympathetically. Roy squealed with delight. Agatha lit a cigarette, took a long drag and muttered, "Solve a case, humiliate a villain, save a woman's life. But one mouldy jam jar and suddenly you're the village joke." Hodge would have agreed, and somewhere behind her annoyance she felt the faintest smile. Justice was done, and she'd earned her cigarette. Carsely woke under a soft wash of morning sun, the kind that made windows gleam and hedgerows look freshly ironed. It was a deceptive peace. Agatha Raisin knew that better than anyone, but today she let herself breathe it in. Her cottage felt unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that follows a storm when everyone is too tired to create new trouble. Agatha stood at the kitchen window watching a pigeon wobble across the lane. Hodge stretched luxuriously on the table, paws extended, tail flicking as though he were demonstrating proper feline satisfaction. She envied him. Hodge had no villagers, no police inspectors, no jam-related humiliation. A soft knock sounded. Rosie hovered outside, clutching a paper bag and wearing the shy smile of someone unused to expressing gratitude. Agatha opened the door. "You look better," she said. Rosie nodded. "I slept for the first time in weeks." She held out the bag. "A thank you. Scones, fresh, no walnuts." Agatha smirked. "Good. I'm traumatized by walnuts." Rosie laughed. A fragile but genuine sound. She stepped inside, glancing at Hodge, who regarded her with tolerant judgment. "I can't repay you," Rosie murmured. "You saved my life." "Don't exaggerate," Agatha said, though her chest warmed. I merely exposed your cousin as a greedy weasel. Rosie took a breath. I've been thinking about my name, Margaret. I hated it because it felt tied to everything frightening. But perhaps I shouldn't hide anymore. Agatha softened, just a shade. Call yourself anything you like. Just call yourself brave. Fresh tears welled in Rosie's eyes, though she blinked them away quickly. I'll try. Thank you, Mrs. Raisin, for everything. Agatha ushered her out before the emotion could settle too heavily. Feelings were exhausting. She far preferred action, gossip, or a well-timed insult. Outside, the village hummed with cautious normalcy. Children biked down the lane. A dog barked half-heartedly. Mrs. Friedman swept her doorstep as if battling invisible filth. Life resumed. And for once, Agatha allowed herself a small, proud stride toward the vicarage. Mrs. Blocksby opened the door before Agatha even knocked. Good morning, Mrs. Raisin. You look almost serene. I'm trying something new, Agatha replied. Temporary serenity. Mrs. Blocksby led her to the kitchen. Steam curled from the teapot, filling the air with gentle warmth. You were very brave, Mrs. Blocksby said, and very tenacious. Tenacity is my fatal flaw, Agatha grumbled. It's also your greatest strength, Mrs. Blocksby said kindly, though perhaps you could be gentler with yourself. Agatha frowned. I am gentle, Mrs. Blocksby smiled politely. Of course. Agatha sipped her tea, savouring the faint reprimand. Mrs. Blocksby always managed to scold her without scolding her, a talent Agatha both admired and resented. Rosie seems stronger today, Mrs. Blocksby said. She'll be fine, Agatha said. Better than fine, she's starting over. We all do from time to time, Mrs. Blocksby murmured, some more loudly than others. I don't start over, Agatha insisted. I charge forward. Exactly, Mrs. Blocksby replied. Agatha changed the subject before she said something dangerously introspective. On the other side of the village, Bill Wong leaned against his police car, reading a freshly typed memo with mixed horror and amusement. Agatha found him there, looking as though he'd just survived a bureaucratic cyclone. What now? She asked. Bill handed her the paper. I'm being commended. Agatha blinked. You're what? Commended, Bill repeated. Officially, for good investigative conduct. Agatha read aloud. Sergeant Wong displayed initiative and excellent judgment in the rapid resolution of the Carsely harassment case. She looked up. Rapid? It took days. Bill smiled faintly. It's rapid for Mercester. What about Wilkes? Agatha asked. Reassigned, Bill said. For morale reasons. Agatha laughed loudly. Morale? Yes. I imagine morale rises several points every time he leaves a room. Bill chuckled. Honestly, Agatha, thank you. The evidence you found forced him to rethink things. Without you, Eric would still be out there and Rosie would still be terrified. Agatha shrugged. You'd have solved it eventually. You give me too much credit, Bill said. No, Agatha said quietly. I give you the credit you deserve. Bill looked touched, which made Agatha look away quickly. Sentimentality was far too contagious. Anyway, she said briskly, handing back the memo, don't get smug. I'll still critique your police work. I expect nothing less, Bill replied. Agatha's triumphant glow carried her straight to the Red Lion. She deserved a drink, possibly several. Charles Fraith lounged near the window, swirling a glass of wine with lazy elegance. Well done, Aggie, he said as she joined him. Don't call me Aggie, but you enjoy it when Bill says it. No, I don't. Charles murmured, as though humouring a child. She glared at him. What? Charles slid a newspaper across the table. Agatha froze. Mercester Gazette, Agatha Raisin's Jam of Doom. A humiliating photograph beneath it showed her staring at her mouldy jar like a woman contemplating homicide. She buried her face in her hands. Why must they publish everything? Because it entertains them, Charles said, and you do tend to make an impression. It's not funny, Agatha hissed. It's a little funny. Agatha grabbed the newspaper and crumpled it. I save the village and they immortalize my jam shame. You'll survive, Charles said lightly. Will I? Agatha muttered. Will I really? He raised his glass. To your heroism. She paused. Heroism. She liked the sound of that. She allowed a small smile. Fine, but only because I'm brilliant. Naturally, Charles said. They were interrupted by Doris Simpson marching over with all the solemnity of a town crier. "Agatha Raisin," Doris declared, "I owe you an apology." Agatha blinked. "For what?" "For thinking Rosie might be behind your walnut fiasco," Doris said. "Turns out her cousin is the wicked one." Agatha accepted this with regal grace. Apology accepted. Doris placed a slice of lemon drizzle cake on the table. "Peace offering." Agatha eyed it. "You didn't include walnuts?" "Of course not," Doris scoffed. "I'm not a monster." Agatha accepted the cake. Peace offerings were rare in Carsely. One took them where one could. Even Mrs. Friedman nodded to her from the bar, a gesture of goodwill rarely granted to anyone except Doris's terrier. Carsely, in its odd and nosy way, had rallied around her. Perhaps victory tasted sweeter than she'd admitted. By late afternoon, the village returned to its usual rhythm of gossip, chores, and minor grievances. Agatha walked home slowly, the cool breeze brushing her cheeks. Despite the success, a quiet tug of loneliness nudged her ribs. It always caught her off guard, this small, unwelcome ache. She'd solved the case. She'd saved Rosie. She'd outwitted Wilkes, soothed Bill, tolerated Roy, and managed not to throttle Charles. And yet... She opened her cottage door. Silence greeted her. Then Hodge appeared, stretching like a small, furry king returning to his throne. "There you are," Agatha murmured, scooping him up. "You missed the drama." Hodge purred, settling on her shoulder as though claiming territory. She felt her chest loosen. Maybe she didn't have a husband, a partner, or a predictable life. But she had a cat, a house, a village that simultaneously annoyed and adored her, and a knack for stumbling into mysteries like stepping on garden rakes. She poured a gin and stared out the window. The dusk arrived early, brushing the cottages in soft lavender shadows. A knock sounded. She opened the door to find Bill Wong holding a paper-wrapped parcel that smelled unmistakably of fish and chips. "Peace offering," he said with a crooked smile. Agatha raised an eyebrow. "Peace? Did we argue?" "Not today," Bill said. "But I thought you might want company." She hesitated. Loneliness prickled. She hated admitting it, but she stepped aside. "Come in." Bill entered, placing the parcel on the table. Hodge sniffed it with ceremonial suspicion. "Thought we could share," Bill said. "You've had a week." "Understatement," Agatha muttered. They settled at the table. The fish was crisp, the chips steaming, the vinegar sharp and comforting. They ate quietly at first, listening to the cottage creak as the evening cooled. "You did good work," Bill said finally. "I know," Agatha replied. Bill smiled. "But you also scared half the police force." "They deserved it." "Probably." They looked out the window together, watching dusk settle like a soft blanket over Carsely. Warm lights blinked on in neighbouring cottages. Somewhere down the lane, Doris's terrier barked at nothing. A faint clatter drifted from the pub. Agatha felt something she rarely allowed: contentment. "Do you think," she said slowly, "that I'll ever stop chasing trouble?" Bill considered. "No," she snorted. "Well, that's blunt." "Trouble doesn't chase you," Bill said. "You chase it, and then glare when you catch it." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. He wasn't wrong. Bill stood to leave a little later, brushing crumbs from his jacket. "Get some rest, Agatha, and enjoy the peace while it lasts." "Peace?" she scoffed. "In this village?" Bill grinned. "Stranger things have happened." After he left, Agatha closed the door gently. She settled into her armchair. Hodge jumped onto her lap, purring like a small engine. She lit a cigarette, watching the smoke curl upward. Outside, the village glowed with the soft, muddled warmth of people who cared far more than they'd ever admit. Perhaps trouble would follow her again. Perhaps gossip would never leave her alone. Perhaps the Gazette would publish another humiliating headline. But for now, in the quiet of her cottage, with Hodge stretching contentedly across her knees, Agatha Raisin allowed herself one rare, fragile thought. She had done some good, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Carsely settled into a rare, sleepy calm, the sort that drifted over the village after a drama had finally run its course. A week had passed since Eric's arrest. Agatha Raisin woke to a modest sunbeam creeping across her bedroom wall, smug as if it had personally restored peace. She stretched, grimaced at her reflection in the mirror, and decided she deserved a morning of domestic triumph, or at least domestic competence. The kitchen, however, seemed determined to sabotage her. Flour clung to the tiles like stubborn frost. The mixing bowl had developed a personality too gleeful by half. Still, Agatha pressed on, cracking eggs with unnecessary force. "People bake," she muttered. "Normal people." Hodge sat on the counter, tail twitching with open disdain. His eyes narrowed as though questioning her mental stability. "Don't judge me," she snapped. "Everyone deserves a second chance, even my baking." She folded ingredients with the stiff determination of someone negotiating a peace treaty. The oven door creaked ominously. Smoke curled the moment she slid the tray inside, a betraying ribbon of grey that rose faster than her dignity. "Oh, for heaven's sake!" Agatha yanked the tray out. A billow of smoke puffed into her face. The alarm gave a threatening beep. Hodge vanished through the open back door, fur bristling in offended retreat. Agatha flung a tea towel at the smoke and cursed village life, ovens, flour, and the entire concept of scones. A knock came at the door. Mrs. Blocksby stepped inside with the calm of a saint entering a battlefield. "I saw smoke," she said gently. "Is everything quite all right?" "Perfectly fine," Agatha snapped. "Just baking." Mrs. Blocksby surveyed the scene, the blackened tray, the flour storm, the open back door where Hodge had fled. "I see," she said kindly. Agatha poured tea with a clatter. "This village is obsessed with calling me dramatic. But look at me. Quiet morning, no mysteries, no danger. I'm practically boring." Mrs. Blocksby smiled. "You are many things, Mrs. Raisin, but boring is not one of them." Flatterer. They sat at the table. Birds chirped outside, and a faint breeze carried the scent of lavender from the garden. "You did a great deal of good," Mrs. Blocksby said softly. "Rosie has a future again. That is no small thing." Agatha fidgeted. Praise always felt like an itchy sweater, pleasant in theory, irritating in practice. I only did what had to be done. Not everyone would have. Agatha waved a dismissive hand, but felt the warmth of the compliment sink in. Mrs. Blocksby always managed to slip wisdom into her conversations like sugar dissolving in tea. "You thrive on justice," Mrs. Blocksby continued, "even when it exhausts you." Agatha bristled. "I am not exhausted, I am—" "Resting," Mrs. Blocksby suggested. "Fine," Agatha conceded. "Perhaps a little." A gentle smile curved the vicar's wife's lips. "Then rest. You've earned it." She left Agatha in a tidier mood than she'd found her in. The post arrived just after noon. Agatha sifted through bills and catalogues until she reached a pale blue envelope. Inside was a small card, handwritten. "Thank you, Mrs. Raisin, for protecting me, for believing me. With courage, Margaret." Agatha inhaled sharply. Margaret, Rosie's real name, a new beginning. She placed the card on the mantelpiece. Hodge reappeared, leaping onto the armchair with the halter of a cat returning from exile. "You're back," Agatha said. Hodge blinked pointedly, as if forgiving her only because he'd grown hungry. The phone rang. Agatha answered. "Raisin." Bill's steady voice came through. "Thought you'd want an update. Wilkes is officially transferred. Some seaside post, far away." Agatha smiled. "Good. The fish can listen to him for once." Bill chuckled. "Take a break, Agatha. Let the village breathe." "Are you implying I caused trouble?" "I would never dare," Bill said, though she heard the grin. Roy's fax machine whirred next, spitting out a glossy invitation covered in flamboyant font. "Agatha darling, London Gala, VIP passes, don't be dull." She snorted. Roy's definition of dull was simply anything quiet. Minutes later, Charles called. "Dinner tonight, Aggie? We could toast your brilliance." "No," Agatha said firmly. "You never make life easy." "Why should I start now?" She hung up before he could charm her into agreeing. For once, she wanted stillness. Evening fell with an early softness, the kind that made Carsely look like a postcard someone had handled too lovingly. Agatha changed into comfortable clothes she would never allow Charles or Roy to witness, and settled in the sitting room. Hodge curled on her lap, warm and heavy. She poured a modest gin, lit a cigarette, and exhaled slowly. The smoke ribboned upward, delicate and unhurried. "Perhaps," she said to Hodge, "I'll take a break from sleuthing." Hodge yawned, a long theatrical protest. "Don't look at me like that," Agatha said. "Normal people take breaks." Hodge stretched, extended one paw over her arm, and blinked disdainfully. "Oh, fine," Agatha muttered. "But next time, we're skipping the fête." Hodge gave a single approving twitch of his tail, granting his royal consent, barely. Agatha leaned back, letting dusk deepen around the cottage. The case was closed. Rosie was safe. Wilkes was gone. The village had relaxed its feathers. For the first time in ages, Agatha felt the strange, quiet pleasure of simply existing. Hodge purred, and Agatha, with a sigh somewhere between annoyance and affection, finally allowed herself to smile.